In February 2000, a construction crew started breaking concrete on the banks of the Isar River in Munich. Not patching it, not reinforcing it, ripping it out. 8 kilometers of vertical walls, stone paving, and steel reinforcement that had locked the river into a straight canal for over a century. The engineers who built the original channel had designed it to stay there forever. The concrete had been in place since before the Second World War, some of it since the 1880s. 3 weeks into demolition, the excavators hit something unexpected in the riverbed. Unexploded bombs. 2 of them sitting in the sediment exactly where they had landed in 1945 and been buried by decades of silt and concrete paving. The demolition stopped. The area was cordoned off. Specialists were called. The bombs were removed. Then the crew went back to breaking concrete. 11 years later, where those walls had been, a wild gravel river ran through the center of Germany's 3rd largest city. On summer weekends, 30,000 people swam in it. And somewhere in the current, holding position in a deep pool behind a submerged log, was a species that no one had expected to find there, an apex predator, the largest salmon in Europe, living wild in the middle of 1.5 million people. This is how a city unburied a river, and what the river did with that. Here is what the Isar looked like in 1990. A straight concrete channel, 50 meters wide, running through the south of Munich between vertical stone walls. The water was low, sometimes dangerously low, because 43 hydroelectric plants upstream were diverting most of it through turbines, leaving the urban riverbed with a trickle that smelled of sewage. The banks were inaccessible. There were no gravel bars, no shallow pools, no eddy lines. The river did not meander, it did not braid. It moved in one straight line at a uniform speed, like water in a drainpipe. On warm summer days, Munich's residents walked past it and kept walking. Now here is what it looks like today. The same stretch of river, the same city around it. But the concrete walls are gone. In their place, gently sloping gravel banks drop to the water's edge. The river is 90 meters wide now, nearly double, and the extra width gives the current room to slow in some places and accelerate in others, creating the kind of textured, varied flow that a natural river has and a canal never can. Gravel islands form and shift with each flood. Willows overhang the shallows. In the deep pools, the water is cold and clear enough to see the bottom. And on a Saturday in July, those banks hold 30,000 people. Children wading, families on blankets, people swimming in water that comes from a glacier in the Austrian Alps, in the middle of a city of 1.5 million. Here is what I find genuinely hard to communicate about this. The people swimming aren't visiting a nature reserve or a protected wetland. They are using a stretch of river that runs through the center of one of the wealthiest, most densely built cities in Europe. The gravel banks are 5 minutes from major roads. The restored floodplain is bordered by apartment buildings. None of that was removed or relocated. The city didn't move. The river moved back into it. The Celts who first settled this site gave the river a name that meant swift water or rushing current, a word that survives today, barely changed, as Isar. For 2 centuries, Munich tried to slow it down. What happened when they stopped is the reason this video exists. The Isar rises in the Karwendel Mountains of the Austrian Alps and flows nearly 300 kilometers north to the Danube. For thousands of years, it crossed Munich as a wild, braided river, with gravel islands, shifting sandbars, and channels that rearranged with every flood. Cold, fast, clear. The gravel beds supported trout, grayling, barbel, and the Huchen, a freshwater predator that can reach 1.5 meters and was, for much of Munich's early history, simply dinner. The city's problem with the Isar was fear, specifically flooding. In 1813, a catastrophic flood killed over 100 people and collapsed a major bridge. In 1899, another flood swept through the city. Only the Iron Bridge survived. After each disaster, more concrete, straighter walls, and a tighter grip on the river that had done this. I want to be clear that this made sense. A river that kills 100 people is not an abstract policy problem. The engineers who channelized the Isar weren't stupid, they were solving the problem in front of them. The catastrophe isn't that they did it, it's that it worked long enough that the alternative became unimaginable. By the mid-19th century, the braided channels were a single straight course. 43 hydroelectric plants diverted water into turbines, leaving the urban riverbed nearly dry for months. In the 1960s and the 1970s, final straightening destroyed what remained of riverside habitat. Sewage flowed directly into the reduced current. Fish ladders were installed, but too steep for small species and too narrow for large ones. The Huchen, which needs fast gravel water with deep pools for ambush, ran out of conditions. It wasn't driven out. There was simply nothing left for it. By the late 20th century, the Isar was a drainage channel with a name. The generation that grew up beside it had never known anything different. The wild braided river survived only in photographs that nobody looked at. What's strange about this, in retrospect, is how quietly it happened. No single decision killed the Isar. Dozens of them, each reasonable in isolation. The flood of 1813, the turbine that needed more water, the straightening in the 1950s. The river lost a little more each time. Whatever remained became the new normal. The first signs of resistance came in the 1980s. A coalition called the Isar Alliance began pressuring Munich City Council. Their initial demand was modest. They asked the council to enforce a minimum flow of 5 cubic meters per second at the city's southern entrance, so the river would stop running dry in summer. The council complied. The Isar Alliance wanted more. They argued the river could be fundamentally restored, not simply maintained, but actually redesigned to function as a natural system. The engineering establishment resisted. The proposal before the council was conventional: raise the levees and pour more concrete. The Isar Alliance fought it for 3 years. Through hydraulic models, public presentations, and community campaigns, they had to prove, with numbers, that a wild gravel river would provide better flood protection than concrete walls. In 1994, Munich City Council voted. The conventional option was on the table. So was naturalization. The council chose naturalization by a narrow margin. It was the personal intervention of Munich's mayor that had kept the project alive long enough to reach that vote. Without it, the levies would have gone up. After the vote, the opposition shifted ground but did not stop. Hydroelectric operators had legal rights to the Isar's water and resisted proposals that would affect their turbines. Some residents preferred the concrete walls, clean and predictable. Gravel banks that shifted after every flood felt like disorder. Stefan Humilius, a water management engineer who later led public tours along the restored river, described the attitude plainly. The concrete had been there so long that people could not imagine the river without it. The walls did not feel like an imposition. They felt like how rivers are. There were also practical objections beyond aesthetics. 1.5 million people lived around the Isar. 43 hydroelectric plants depended on its water. Every design decision had to account for the city that existed, not just the river that once had. In 1995, the Isar Plan Working Group was formally established. 2 designs competed: engineered stone terracing versus full naturalization with wild gravel banks. The compromise was clever. Reinforcements would be buried below ground, hidden beneath vegetation. The engineering would hold. The river would look wild. Nobody walking the banks would see the infrastructure. Construction began in February 2000. It lasted 11 years. 35 million euros. 2 buried bombs. The demolition proceeded in 7 sections, roughly 1 per year. The main channel was widened from 50 to 90 meters. Steep concrete embankments were torn out and replaced with gently sloping gravel banks. 17 old fish ladders were demolished and replaced with flat stone ramps in a honeycomb pattern, structures that fish of any size could navigate, from small loach to large Huchen. 7 million euros of the 35 million euro budget went to an unexpected line item: removal of unexploded weapons from the Second World War, buried beneath the riverbed since 1945. As the concrete came out, the the demolition teams found them. They removed them. They kept going. Without walls forcing it straight, the water started carving its own path. Gravel banks emerged where paving had been. Islands formed and reformed with each flood, not according to any design, but according to the physics of a fast alpine river depositing sediment when velocity drops. Nobody placed those gravel bars. The river placed them. The mechanism is simple once you see it. The old channel functioned as a pipe. Water moved fast, with nowhere to slow and nowhere to deposit sediment. Widening to 90 meters reduced velocity enough for gravel to settle into the varied patterns fish need for spawning. Shallow riffles alongside deep pools. Fast current next to calm eddies. A straight canal offers every species the same thing, nothing specific. A braided river offers something different every 100 meters. Midway through construction, the river delivered its verdict. In 2005, a major flood devastated communities across southern Germany. Munich's already restored sections absorbed the floodwater far more effectively than the remaining concrete channel. The widened banks spread the water, the gravel islands broke its momentum, and the restored floodplain held what the old walls would have sent racing into the city. The 2013 flood, Bavaria's so-called flood of the century, confirmed it again. The design called reckless outperformed the concrete in the exact scenario the concrete was supposed to handle best. The ecological recovery built in stages. First came the gravel spawning fish. Common nays and barbel returned to breed around the Flaucher, Munich's most popular bathing area, where fish reproduction had been considered inconceivable for decades. The honeycomb ramps allowed species trapped behind impossible weirs to move freely along the entire restored stretch for the first time in living memory. Then brown trout came, drawn by cooler water over clean gravel. Then insects. The new embankments, seeded with indigenous herbs and left to develop as sparse dry grassland, brought butterflies, the Adonis blue, and the checkered skipper, species that require exactly this kind of habitat and had no foothold in the old concrete city. Deadwood was deliberately placed along the shoreline, anchored by gravel so the floods would not carry it away. The submerged logs became habitat for insect larvae, freshwater crayfish, mussels, and worms. A food web radiated outward from every piece of rotting timber. Species that had nothing to colonize in a concrete channel arrived within seasons of having something to work with. Then the predators. Kingfishers appeared along the gravel shallows. Beavers returned to the urban Isar, their gnawed stumps and lodges visible to anyone walking the banks inside city limits. Neither was reintroduced. They arrived because the conditions had come back. And then the fish nobody had predicted. The Huchen, the Danube salmon, is the largest salmonid in Europe. 1.5 meters, 50 kilograms. Endangered across most of its range. It needs fast gravel water, deep pools, dead wood for ambush, the exact habitat structure that channelization destroys everywhere it goes. It was found in the restored Isar, not just present, but reproducing and holding territory in the center of Munich. Ichthyologists noted what this likely means. Munich may be the only city of its size anywhere in the world where this endangered fish successfully reproduces in its urban river. That was not in the 1995 planning documents. Nobody put Huchen returns to the city center in the project objectives. It happened because a river given enough room will rebuild what was taken from it, not on a schedule, not according to a plan, but on its own terms when the conditions are finally right. The Huchen is the evidence. Water quality followed. Every community along the Isar upgraded wastewater treatment to include ultraviolet irradiation. Before the restoration, swimming in the Isar was a health risk. After it, 30,000 people share the same stretch of water on a summer weekend with spawning fish and one of Europe's rarest apex predators. The total cost was 35 million euros, 28 million euros for construction, 7 million euros for contaminated site remediation. The Bavarian state covered 55%, Munich the rest. For that, the city got flood protection, bathing quality water, biodiversity restoration, a recreational landscape, and an endangered apex predator in its urban river. Conventional hard engineering, raising the levees, would have addressed flood protection alone at comparable cost. The Isar plan won Germany's first award for river development in 2007. A downstream EU project extended restoration to the lower valley, creating 5 hectares of shallow fish habitat and 20 new lakes. Post-project surveys recorded a 40-fold increase in Danube trout and a 100-fold increase in common nays. But 30,000 people on 8 kilometers of riverbank create pressures no ecological design fully anticipates. Bathers pushed juvenile fish from shallow nursery areas into deeper water where predators waited. Cigarette butts carrying nicotine, arsenic, and lead proved lethal to fish in the shallows. The German tamarisk, deliberately planted during restoration, was trampled and became endangered at the very site it had been introduced to restore. Ecologists at the Technical University of Munich noted the obvious: a wild river and a public park for 1.5 million people are not the same thing. Making them coexist requires ongoing management, not a one-time engineering project. The Isar plan solved a construction problem brilliantly. The usage problem it created is ongoing and harder to resolve, because the people who use the river are also the people who fought for its restoration, and telling them to use it less is not a straightforward political argument. The northern stretch of the Isar within Munich remains unrestored. Discussions about extending the project have been going on for a decade. There is a detail in this story I keep coming back to. The people who opposed the restoration were not wrong about everything. The concrete walls were stable, the canal was predictable. The people who preferred them to the proposed gravel banks were not irrational, they had a point. What they were missing was the question of what the concrete was replacing, what it had erased, what had existed before the 1880s and had slowly stopped existing as the walls went up, the gravel islands disappeared, the fish stopped coming, the swimmers stopped swimming, and a generation grew up beside a drainage channel and accepted it as a river. The Isar Alliance spent 15 years fighting for a vision the engineering establishment called reckless. Without their persistence, Munich would have raised the levees, poured more concrete, and the Huchen would not be in this video. Stefan Humilius, who now leads visitors along the restored banks, ends every tour the same way. He tells people to put their feet in the Isar and experience it for themselves. In his view, that is a better way of understanding renaturalization than having it explained. It is what it feels like to stand in fast, cold water from a glacier older than the city, in a river that Munich spent 2 centuries trying to tame and 11 years finally letting go. On summer evenings, families spread blankets on gravel banks that were concrete within living memory. Children wade into water that flows from ice older than civilization. Somewhere beneath, in a deep pool behind a submerged log, a Huchen holds position in the current. An apex predator older than the city, living wild in 1.5 million people's backyard. The Celts named this river for its speed. For 2 centuries, Munich tried to make it stay where it was told. It took 35 million euros, 11 years, and 2 unexploded bombs to remember why that was always going to fail. The rest, the river handled on its own.